There was a famous photo years ago in the BYU student section that read, "We want Bama." Well, the good news is all these years later, BYU gets just that in basketball. It's the Cougars versus the Crimson Tide in the Sweet 16 with a berth in the Elite Eight on the line.
You are Locked On Cougars, your daily podcast on the BYU Cougars, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, everybody? I'm Jake Hatch, your host here on Locked On Cougars, resident BYU insider. Thank you for making Locked On Cougars your first listen of the day. As always, thank you to all of you who are everydayers with us right here on your original daily podcast focused on the BYU Cougars. Today's show is brought to you by our friends over at Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the promo code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first ticket purchase. All right, coming up on today's show, we're going to talk about BYU and Alabama, some initial thoughts as we finally know who BYU will face in the Sweet 16 this Thursday in Newark, New Jersey. We'll also talk about a crazy coincidence. It's not a coincidence, but nonetheless, the NCAA transfer portal for college basketball opens, yes, today. We'll talk about what BYU is endeavoring to do with the portal, and then we'll finish up with some additional thoughts on targets BYU should have with the portal opening up as well. All right, so without further ado, many of you saw it yesterday. BYU will officially take on the Alabama Crimson Tide in the Sweet 16 this Thursday, and this is a game that the preview I have for you just at the outset, and I'll obviously dig more into this, and we'll talk more about it tomorrow and obviously ensuing days leading up to Thursday when BYU and the Crimson Tide square off, is that looking at this game, BYU and Alabama may take what we saw from BYU and Wisconsin and take it to another level. We saw a 91-89 game on Saturday night between BYU and the Badgers. And let's just put it this way. The way that Alabama plays, this could be a game that's in the hundreds based on the pace of play that Alabama and BYU like to favor in their style. Nate Oates said it in his post-game press conference. They are more stylistically like us than anybody else. And that's not a slight in any degree. This is promising to be a very, very high-paced, high-scoring, just a high level type game. And BYU's got to be ready for it. Obviously, they've got a full 5 days to get ready for it. Kevin Young said it himself. He got out a nice scout, and it showed against Wisconsin after winning that game against VCU. He said he essentially spent the night after the VCU game and then the next day game planning it. I think we could all tell that game plan was cohesive, it was complete, and BYU knew exactly what to expect from the Wisconsin Badgers. Now he's got a full 5 days to find a counter to what to expect from this Alabama Crimson Tide team, and it's not going to be easy. I said it about Wisconsin that the first to 90 could win it. I'm telling you, this game against Alabama, maybe the first 100 does it, and that's crazy to consider. I get all that, but the other thing about this, I didn't want to play St. Mary's in my heart of hearts. The more I thought about it, I talked about it on our postcast Saturday night. People were asking me, well, do you want to see St. Mary's? Do you want to see Alabama? And I said that there's a history of St. Mary's, all that stuff from the West Coast Conference. Yes, it would have been nice to get some payback, as it were, all these years later, facing off against the Gales and send smug-faced Randy Bennett off. But the bigger point is that St. Mary's team would make it an absolute just drag into the mud slog, and I didn't want that. I want this type of a game that BYU and Alabama apparently will play, and that's high-paced, high-volume shooting, a lot of shots from beyond the arc, a lot of attacking of the rim, and I'm looking forward to it. And if we get, semi-decent officiating, yeah, this could be a game that ends up with the winning margin being in the hundreds, and that's not the winning margin, the winning score, somebody in the hundreds, and the other team probably in the 90s. It's just maybe they have 100 themselves. It's got that type of potential in it, and I'm looking forward to it. I have enjoyed watching Alabama, and I don't proclaim to have watched a ton of Alabama this year. Many of you know that I struggle to watch a lot of college basketball. It's just not stylistically something that I enjoy. I prefer the NBA game. I know some of you don't, but that's my preference. But when I have seen Alabama play, they are one of the teams in college basketball I don't mind sitting down and watching, because it is a high level of basketball IQ. It's high level hoops, and it's aesthetically pleasing. And I'm there for the entertainment. I'm not there to watch teams foul each other 55 times and maybe 50 more that don't get called. That's not it for me. And we kind of saw that with the Wisconsin game because the officials seemingly couldn't get out of their own way. When Moebic had the audacity to point at the screen and say, "You screwed up." The ref showed up big time. Was it Mike Reed? I think that said the name of the referee was, and he teased him up. That happens in literally every game across college basketball, but I digress. I think this is shaping up to be a really, really fun game between the Crimson Tide and the Cougars. And I, for one, I'm here for it. I think this could be a game, much like the Wisconsin game, as I said, that could be a game that you remember fondly because of just the high level nature of the game. And I hope it delivers. I absolutely hope it delivers. Nate Oates has done a really good job recruiting high-level talent to Alabama. We all know that the Crimson Tide, they're a football school of the highest order. When Nick Saban did what he did at the helm of the Alabama football program, it's hard to really carve out a really strong presence, it feels like, in Tuscaloosa. But to Nate Oates' credit, he has done a very, very good job with it. And I think BYU, in some ways, with the basketball program, has the same problem. We all know that BYU football, it takes the lion's share of the attention and obviously the funds. It generates the most funds, just much like Alabama does. But this is a fun part that these two programs that are at football-dominated schools can step out and essentially say, hey, the state claim that we are one of the premier programs on our respective campuses, and let's see who proves to be best on the basketball court. So I look forward to this. It was the game stylistically I was hoping for. I know some of you are terrified that it's Alabama. They're a 2 seed, but here's the deal. BYU plays absolutely fearless basketball right now. Did you sense any fear from that BYU squad on Saturday night? I didn't. They went toe-to-toe with a very strong, a very capable Wisconsin Badgers team, and I sensed zero doubt, zero fear in these guys. They are playing with a lot of confidence, and that will carry you a long way in the NCAA men's basketball tournament. We have seen teams that come into the tournament questioning themselves get bounced. That's not this BYU team. They wholeheartedly believe in what they are doing. The other thing about this with Alabama and BYU is these are two of the deepest rosters in all of college basketball. I should have pointed this out earlier. Nate Oates plays as many as 10 guys in game. We know BYU plays as deep as 11 guys, and it's been a routine thing under Kevin Young. So get used to watching maybe the vast majority of these respective rosters in this game on Thursday, but I get the sense that BYU absolutely believes that they can go out and accomplish something that has not been accomplished in BYU basketball history, namely going to the Final Four. Now, that is going to require 2 major wins this week. I am expecting that Duke will advance, and that would be your Elite 8 opponent on Saturday if you do advance. But you got to get through Alabama first. So full focus on the Crimson Tide. And if you can get past that, then we're talking about for the second time since the tournament expanded back in the 70s, because it was 16 teams for years. And I know BYU's been to the Elite 8 a couple of times in those 1950s era squads. But since the tournament expanded to 32 and ultimately now 68 teams, BYU's only been to the Elite 8 once. And we all know what it took for Danny Ainge to go the length of the court against Notre Dame to get them there in 1981. Can 2025 deliver that same thing? Big opportunity, big question marks, but the nice part is it's all there for the taking for this BYU basketball squad. And I, for one, I'm all in on this, and I'm looking forward to seeing what goes down Thursday night in Newark, New Jersey. And I hope a number of you are making the trek to watch BYU. If you're on the East Coast, you have a chance to get up to Newark, get there. Cougar Nation represents well. It represented extremely well in Denver. Let's do the same thing in Newark, and looking forward to seeing thousands of BYU fans clad in royal blue, hopefully in Newark, to watch BYU and Alabama this Thursday. All right, coming up next, got a little bit of a crazy week for BYU because in addition to getting ready for one of the biggest games in recent memory for BYU basketball, they also have the transfer portal opening. Yes, the transfer portal opens today. What to expect from BYU when it comes to portal madness? We're talking about it next right here on Locked On Cougars. Today's show is brought to you by our friends over at 5 Hour Energy. If daylight savings still got you down, my friends, you're missing out on that lost hour of sleep. 5 Hour Energy has your back. The extra sunshine means more time for fun, but sometimes need a little boost to power through to get through your day. Whether you're staying up late to watch the NCAA tournament, squeezing in around a golf, or just trying to keep up with your busy day, 5 Hour Energy gives you that quick, refreshing pick-me-up whenever you need it. Obviously, a number of us have been burning the candle at both ends watching the tournament, but even if just beyond that, you're doing something else with your day, you can get that extra boost with our friends over at 5 Hour Energy. Head to 5hourenergy.com to find over 15 flavors to choose from, including watermelon, blue raspberry, tropical burst, and peach mango. You can build your own 12 or 24 pack delivered right to your door. Need one now? Get a 5 Hour Energy shot at your local grocery or convenience store. They're everywhere. Stock up today and stay energized once you get started today at 5hourenergy.com. Today's show is brought to you by one of our great local sponsors. That's our friends over at Post District. You can discover Post District, home to 4 of Salt Lake's newest and most stylish apartment buildings right now. The Register, Post House North, Post House South, and of course, 801 Flats. Each residence offers its own unique take on luxury urban living, like with features like waterfall kitchen islands, floor-to-ceiling windows, vaulted ceilings, and the best part is spacious patios and walk-in closets to boot. Enjoy premium amenities, including the city's largest residential gym, a year-round pool, golf simulator, massive TV wall for sports watching parties. You might be able to watch the NCAA tournament this weekend and more, all anchored in a one-of-a-kind community. Step outside and find yourself immersed in Salt Lake's hottest dining and nightlife scene with award-winning spots like Urban Hill, Mencho Ramen, Level Crossing, Melancholy Wine Bar, and of course, Sunday's Best, just steps away from your new home. Whether you're looking for a studio, 1, 2, 3-bedroom, or a penthouse, Post District has the perfect home for you. Visit liveatpost.com or call 801-590-6247. That's 801-590-6247. Mention this ad with Locked On Cougars for an exclusive incentive as well, or start today by visiting them at liveatpost.com. Thank you once again for making Locked On Cougars your first listen of the day. Hope y'all are doing well out there. All right. I know it sounds just absolutely insane to consider this, but it is in fact the open of the transfer portal today in college basketball. Yes, the NCAA tournament is still going on. Yes, BYU is playing in the Sweet 16. Yes, there is everything going on around BYU having a chance to play for a national championship still, but the NCAA in their infinite wisdom has opened the NCAA transfer portal, and that means guys could leave BYU right now. Do I expect that to happen? No, but BYU can start to get in the rat race for guys for next year if they want to. So that's the interesting part about this, is how much is BYU going to have to balance preparations for the Sweet 16, but also at the same time, look at the hundreds, if not thousands of other guys who are going to enter the transfer portal and try and evaluate who they may want to add. That's an interesting little adjustment that Kevin Young and his staff will have to make. Now, his staff has never been bigger. Speaking of the coach at BYU overall, he has 5 assistants. There are multiple GAs. There's analytics people. There's recruiting people. They have plenty of personnel to balance this just right at the outset. I'm not going to say that BYU's at a disadvantage with this. The only concern I have is that 75-ish%, maybe even more than that, of the college basketball world. No, it's far more than that. There's 300 and some odd teams. Only 16 teams remain. So scratch that. We're talking a large majority of the college basketball universe. Their seasons are complete, and they will be able to essentially jump in the rat race and start to bring guys in for visits, obviously start to talk numbers with regards to revenue share, NIL, all the different things that go in to transfer portal madness out there, and it promises to be absolute madness. Now, speaking from the BYU perspective, Myron Metcalf tweeted this on Saturday night. I've got to pull it up here. But he laid out essentially that the NCAA is going to open the transfer portal. Man, I had it open. I screwed up on this, so apologies while we tread water here. But he made a very good point about what BYU is going to be capable of doing here in the NCAA. So it says BYU in the Sweet 16, the portal opens Monday, and they have more money than anybody. Trust me, it should be a fun week in Provo. Myron Metcalf was the individual, speaking of the ESPN reporter, who came to Utah and did that big story that the booster, was it Dan Lillianquist, who made the statement, "We will not be outbid," speaking of BYU and NIL. BYU, whoever they want in the transfer portal, will have the requisite funds to be able to chase those players in the transfer portal. Heck, this team is paying one player next year in AJ DeBonsa, reportedly $8.5 million. That comes from that report from Myron Metcalf. There's been other reports that it's $4 million, it's $5 million, it's $6 million. highest number I've heard is from Metcalf, who said 8.5 million, but he's saying, trust me, that BYU has more money than anybody. Tony Jones from The Athletic, obviously covering the NBA, Utah Jazz, Denver Nuggets. He said that he was told a ballpark figure for BYU's NIL fund for next year, and he used the OMG, but spelled it all the way out. And that's fun. To consider that BYU is one of, if not the biggest player when it comes to overall NIL funds out there, that means that the good times should keep on rolling for this BYU basketball team. Obviously, has to be the right mix of guys. That's the big question, is how many guys do you bring in versus how many guys leave? You can obviously we'll talk more about that in a moment, things that I think BYU needs to look at in the portal and may want to start looking right now just because of how many guys will be going in the portal. And I use the term rat race because it's exactly what it is. It is absolute madness. I've said this before. I'll say it again. When it comes to the transfer portal, a lot of you are used to recruiting in the college athletic sense of spending weeks, if not months, talking with guys via the phone, making in-home visits, bringing them on unofficial visits to campus, official visits finally. All that takes place over literal months, if not years, for a lot of prospects when it comes to high school recruiting. In the day and age of the transfer portal, I can tell you those conversations are happening in mere minutes. I have had it told me on good authority by multiple people who coach in college athletics that when it comes to the transfer portal, especially when it comes to football and also basketball, speaking of men's basketball, you send a text to a young man once they hit the portal, say, hi, I'm Coach so-and-so from X University here. We are interested in you. Are you interested in talking with us further about our program? They say yes, you continue the conversation. You say no, you say thank you, have a great day, and you're on to the next. It literally is, it's transactional of the highest order of these relationships. And it's not anybody's fault. It's just the simple nature of what the transfer portal entails with regards to the future of your program. You have to find guys, and I'm speaking of guys plural, to find the right mix to come in and hopefully reestablish what your program is all about. BYU's program, well, they are aspiring to win national championships, and they are willing to spend top dollar, literal top dollar, to bring in the talent to allow BYU to compete at the highest levels. I am all for it. I know there are rival fan bases out there, none bigger than Utah State and Utah in particular, who like to use that term. You can buy anything with money. You know what? You know what that smacks of? It smacks of jealousy. It smacks of resentment. It smacks of the fact that you are pissed off that BYU went out, got its boosters in order, found out who had money, who wants to spend it, and has now got an NIL fund that rivals literally anybody's, according to Myron Metcalf, in all of college basketball. You know what my unsolicited advice for those so-called fans out there is to go and take that energy you spend on social media and trying to tear down BYU and make a joke at their expense and turn right around, go and try and recruit some people who have some means to boost your own NIL coffers in the hopes that you can hang with the Cougars. That's what I would recommend for those so-called fans. That aside, bigger point to be made here is this BYU basketball team has got a major opportunity right now, obviously, to win and win at a high level. But also the second part of it is to continue to build what they have established and build upon it and add pieces that are only going to make them better. That's the fun part about this BYU basketball squad right now, is they have got a lot of pieces already in place that are set to return, I would expect. I would look at guys Richie Saunders, TBD, Dallin Hall, I expect to come back for another year. Keba Keita obviously is out there. You have a ton already on this roster for BYU. Now can you cherry pick the best pieces from the transfer portal out there and insert them into your lineup for next year and say, okay, we were good this year. Watch how much better we possibly could be next year. Like I said, it's an inexact science because it's anybody's guess as to how some of these players will fit in, because you don't quite know until they ultimately enroll at BYU. But the bigger point to be made is BYU has everything they need to compete at an extremely high level and has the requisite funds that it requires, because the other thing about this with those other fan bases is BYU's playing by the rules, and y'all still want to, you know what? You still want to moan? Great. Go for it. BYU is playing by the rules of the game, and they're just simply kicking your butt. Great. whine some more. You sound like my children that I get after all the time for all the whining they seem to do. I love the fact that BYU is in it to win it. And I hope that they do win at an extremely high level. They're winning at an extremely high level right now. They've made their third Sweet 16 in 44 years. The last two times they did, I've said it multiple times on this podcast, the last two times BYU made it this far in the NCAA tournament, it required them having the National Player of the Year on the roster. This team is set up right now for success, and the pieces that are returning look like they are primed to take them to even higher heights, hopefully, than they already have right now. So really, really impressed with what BYU is doing. But with the portal opening today, going to be an interesting week, as Myron Medcalf points out, because now you have to balance, obviously, preparations for going to Newark and playing in the Sweet 16, but also at the same time, how much evaluation, how much contact, how much of the rat race can you get into with regards to the transfer portal? And man, crazy times are about to unfold, but at the same time, it's a whole heck of a lot of fun to watch this BYU team do what it does. And if there's any staff, it feels like right now, that can handle the two-faced deal you're going to have to face here, obviously trying to get ready for a game, but also at the same time, set your program up for the future. BYU is one of the few that I think could handle it, because Kevin Young has proven very capable of handling multiple things on his plate. Remember when he took over, he was absolutely masterful in how he balanced all the different things he had to do as literally a brand new head coach. And he's just been remarkable since he's taking over this BYU basketball program. All right. That brings us to the question: what does BYU need to target in the transfer portal? We'll dig into that next as we continue on right here on Locked On Cougars. Today's show is brought to you by our friends over at Game Time. Imagine watching your favorite team, speaking to the BYU Cougars live, feeling the energy of the crowd and witnessing unforgettable moments, maybe this week at the Sweet 16 in Newark, New Jersey. There's nothing like experiencing a big game in person, and getting tickets shouldn't be stressful. That's where Game Time comes in, making it easier than ever to grab last-minute seats at unbeatable prices. Creation with the Game Time Picks feature makes it easier to find better value for tickets to sporting events, concerts, theater, comedy. No matter what you're into, they've got the options for you guys. You can go online right now and see what might be available for the Sweet 16 this weekend. The best part is they have the lowest price guarantee, or Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. That's their guarantee to you. They have peace of mind with seat views before you buy, no surprise fees, and a lowest price guarantee you can book with total confidence, my friends. So take a guess for buying your tickets and do it with our friends over at Game Time. Download the Game Time app today, create an account, and use the promo code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. That's LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, and of course, it's guaranteed. Thank you once again for making Locked On Cougars your first listen of the day. Another plug for you guys, if you've not done so already, join the Locked On Cougars Insiders group. Get the inside scoop on all things BYU that I'm hearing coming to your phone in the form of a text message. It's a great way to build this community we have with the podcast, and it only costs $5 a month to be a part of the group. But the best part is, for those of you who sign up right now, 14 days free, 2 full weeks to see if it's the right option for you. Join today. Click the link in the show notes below and be a part of the Locked On Cougars Insider Group. All right, before we go on today's show, let's talk a little bit about BYU's transfer portal needs. Obviously, I mentioned the BYU's, the pieces they have intact are very, very tantalizing. You obviously are going to have to monitor guys in the portal, because BYU's not immune to guys potentially leaving. The crazy thing is you look at the roster, and there's still a lot of underclassmen on that roster that could be picked off. And if you believe that BYU is not having guys contacted, or has been having guys contacted for quite literally months now via the transfer portal and the NIL agents, all the different people that are involved in it, you got your head buried in the sand. It is kind of the unspoken side of what the transfer portal entails. You are going to see multiple guys who enter the portal, immediately come back out of the portal, whether it's with their old program or new program, and it feels like it was just literal minutes when they did that. Well, it's because, some illicit contact is happening. But BYU's not immune to it, and they shouldn't take offense to it, because the simple fact of the matter is literally everybody is doing it. All right, that brings me to the point. What does BYU need to add in the transfer portal? Well, number one, you got to find a replacement for Moet Mag. Obviously, he has been masterful as a 3-and-D guy for BYU, has been that lockdown defender. Can they go out in the portal and find a guy? Remember last year, Kevin Willard, the head coach of Maryland, if I recall correctly, called Mawit Mag the best defender in college basketball. Well, Mawit has proven to be everything BYU could have hoped for as a perimeter defender. You've got to find one of those guys in the portal if at all possible. Other guys I would be looking at. Well, Fousseyni Traore is exiting the program. Kebaketa is a fantastic big man on the law, his verticality, his vertical threat, awesome on offense, elite defensively, obviously. But he does not have the back to the basket, toss it into the low post. That type of a guy, that's not Kebaketa. So you need to go out and find a guy who has a back to the basket game. Is Xavier Staten that guy, the incoming freshman? I wouldn't consider him to be that at this juncture. He could become it in time, but that will take development. So I'm looking for a big man. Now, Foose has been an absolute glue guy for BYU for multiple years. It's going to be hard to replace what he has meant to BYU, but you have to endeavor to find a replacement there. You look at other guys exiting the program, Trey Stewart. You also look at Trevin Nell. Guys who are proven to be spot-up shooters. And if Richie Saunders, heaven forbid, does decide to enter the NBA draft, etc., that leaves you a dearth of offensive talent on the perimeter. One of those, if not the guy on the perimeter who's going to be BYU's lead dog, is AJ DeBonsa. But he needs people to be able to spell him. I don't know what Cannon Catching's plan is. I don't know what Brody Kozlowski. I don't know what Elijah Crawford are thinking as freshmen who obviously didn't play a lot, especially late in the season in the case of a kid like Cannon Catchings. What do their futures hold? Are they going to look elsewhere? If they don't, those are phenomenal options to have as bench players, but I don't see outside of Cannon Catching, should he develop nicely, any one of those guys being the legit option 2 on the wing to AJ DeBonsa. So I'm looking for a perimeter scorer. I'm looking for a true guy who is a threat from beyond the arc as a 3-point shooter, because Kevin Young, he will generate copious amounts of 3-pointers for guys. And if they're capable of hitting them, you're going to look absolutely phenomenal in this offense. I will also add this caveat. Anybody who BYU contacts would be insane not to consider playing for the BYU Cougars. I say that as the biased of all biased people, because let's look at what BYU is doing right now. NBA level offense, NBA level development, NBA style of play. Why wouldn't you? In your heart of hearts, why wouldn't you want to play for BYU? Okay, I get that the transfer portal might be a holdup for certain guys. I get that the academic requirements could be a holdup for certain people, but BYU will do their homework on those young men, and they will make sure that they check out before really proceeding too far down the path with those players. At least I would sincerely hope so, but I understand that BYU's administration, Kevin Young, they espouse to uphold what BYU stands for. The nice part about BYU is it's a fairly distraction-free zone to come and play basketball in. Remember, a lot of that stuff that can distract you off the court is stuff that BYU simply doesn't allow under the guidelines of the honor code. So I look at this as a major recruiting tool that BYU needs to tap into and find guys. So once again, you need a true 3-and-D guy. That's what Mawit Mag has been. I think he's priority number 1 because one of the toughest things to replace is a guy who can play elite perimeter defense in college basketball and, get away with it. And I know get away with it sounds crazy to say that, but let's be honest. College basketball officiating yet again is just absolutely downright awful. And it's insane to look at how things go. But you need an elite defender. You need an elite perimeter scorer to be the Robin to AJ DeBonsa's Batman. I think at the point guard spot, whether Jaeger Demon exits or not, Dallin Hall is very capable, if he comes back for another year, of being the guy who holds it all down. And I'm saying all of this without really knowing who's in the portal at this juncture. It literally opened today. By the time you listen to this podcast, there could be guys from BYU whose names are in the portal. It's a crazy week here with BYU. And I don't know necessarily what to expect. I expect there will be some guys who exit the portal, but they may not enter the portal until after BYU's run in the NCAA tournament is done. And I think that's probably in their best interest because that could obviously upset the apple cart when it comes to BYU and the incredible run they're on right now. The portal does remain open until April 22nd. So there is plenty of time for BYU's guys to stay with the program, stay engaged, do the things they're doing. And if that run ends, BYU then can say, hey, Thank you for sticking with us. Let's get you in the portal. Let's find out what we can help you out with, or if we can make it worth your while to stick around. I think the best thing you can do, and coaches will tell you this all the time, is keep the guys that are in the fold there if at all possible. Sure, there may be a player here and there that just the staff and he essentially decide that it's in their best interest mutually to part ways, but more often than not, coaches don't want to put in quite literally hours and months and years of work in developing players only to watch them hit the exit and look for another program to play for. They'd rather have guys that they've invested in stick around and continue to sink that investment into those players with the whole thought that those players, their loyalty will mean more to the program versus bringing in that so-called hired gun to bring them in and make them a part of your program. It's not I've said it before, it's not an exact science because you're obviously trying to get a feel for guys in a very quick fashion and understand what their background's all about, how they fit in with teammates. You're doing so much background work in a very short order that you have to be very meticulous in how you go about it. But I think the BYU, priority number 1, 3-and-D defender. Priority number 2, I guess they're all priorities at this point. But 3-and-D defender. Back to the basket big man who you can toss it into the low block and they're going to get you a bucket in a moment you need it. That's what Fousseyni Traore, the one thing I will always give him credit for is when BYU needed big buckets, he could use that absolutely just gargantuan frame to clear space and more often than not put the ball in the bucket and help BYU get points. You need that type of a guy on this roster. And then also, like I said, you need somebody that can play off or some buddies plural that can play off AJ DeBonsa and be those guys who can be in the corner and knock down threes, can make their own play happen if AJ DeBonsa is getting double teams. You need guys who can be difference makers. I like what BYU has on the roster right now, especially if Dallin Hall and Richie Saunders come back. BYU's poised to do some really special things. Dawson Baker, obviously, is a fantastic bench piece to come in. I look at this roster and say there's not a lot missing from it. We already heard that Mihailo Boskovic is going to come back. The Salt Lake Tribune had that story, and that's awesome to hear that he wants to come back for what will be his senior season as a 23-year-old. With another year of development, I think Mihailo can become an even better player than he already is. And he's been a fairly capable guy for this BYU team, but I look at even the young players, the Crawfords out there. If Jaeger Demon decides against all odds, it feels like, to spurn the NBA draft and come back to BYU, great. You could have a team that is formidable and absolutely will terrify certain teams out there, but you also have the opportunity to add guys via the portal to replace the pieces that are simply out of eligibility. I like where BYU's roster stands right now. I'm not here to say that BYU is dead in the water and needs to have a complete overhaul. In fact, quite far from it. The best part about where BYU sits right now is they can essentially go look at what's in the portal and then say, okay, are they better than what we have right now, or do we need to look elsewhere? And that is a phenomenal place to be if you're the BYU basketball program. So let me know what you think. Are there any other players you'd like to see BYU add? I'd welcome your feedback. Drop them in the notes below if you're watching this on YouTube. Sound off on social media. Send us an email. However you want to weigh in, let us know. What do you think the priorities that BYU needs to target in the transfer portal are? And we'll get to those on a future edition here of Locked On Cougars. But once again, as always, thank you so much for your guys' support. We're going to wrap it up here. Thank you for being everydayers here on the podcast. And as I often say, thank you for making Locked On Cougars your first listen of the day.